I have an unusual background for the chairman of the NEA. I was a poet and a writer, uh, although I had spent 15 years in business because my family was broke and I had to make my own way in the world. I fell in love with the arts in childhood from the first time I heard music, saw paint, any kind of art, visual arts, heard poetry. And so my whole life, I knew that I was drawn to the arts. I didn't really know what I would do, so I began really in music. Then I realized I wanted to be a poet. And then there came a certain point in graduate school when I realized I wanted to be a poet, but I didn't want to teach creative writing. I wanted to write poetry in the way I wanted to do it. And so having no other options, I quit graduate school and I got a job in business. And I stayed there for 15 years until I was well known enough to make my living as a writer. And so at the age of 40, I became a full-time writer. The creation of the National Endowment for the Arts represented a point of maturation and, I think, internationalization in American culture. The Kennedy and the Johnson administration, I think, looked towards most other countries in the world, and they had ministries of culture. They had government support of the arts. This was something which had really gone against the American culture, earlier. When they created the National Council on the Arts and Humanities, they were, in a sense, trying to represent the maturity of the United States in terms of sponsoring, supporting, and sharing its own culture. The challenge was that they didn't know exactly what to do. They realized they didn't want a European system or Latin American system where the Ministry of Culture was an extension of politics. And so they created a different system which gave these institutions independence of the political process. That has been the strength and the weakness of the endowments. I had an advantage that no other chairman had. When it was announced that President Bush had nominated a poet to run what was considered the most controversial agency in the United States, people didn't know what to do. It was an amusement to them. And so I came into Washington and everybody assumed that I was a lamb being led to the slaughter. And there's no advantage quite so great as being underestimated. I spent the first 100 days, I'm not a political person. I have no interest in political office. I didn't want this job. I took it because I thought the United States needed to save the NEA. So I spent the first 100 days talking to everybody in Washington, and I spent every night alone in my office trying to figure out on one piece of paper what the NEA should be, how it should be expressed to the American people, the American politicians, and the media in a compelling argument that justified its existence. But I did that eventually, and it proved to be successful, positioning the NEA as the official agency of the United States government that brought the best of arts and arts education to all Americans. So what I wanted was a simple way of expressing what the NEA was and what it did. And I think one of the historical problems with the NEA is it just assumed that people knew how great it was. And it let other people, for good or bad, project their fantasies and their fears on the agencies. I wanted to be very clear. And it took me a long time to get it down to explaining what it was and giving examples. And so I came up with the National Endowment for the Arts was the official arts agency of the U.S. government. It was dedicated to bringing the best of arts and arts education to all Americans. Now, if you look at that, it's a fairly specific mission, but it had never existed before my chairmanship, except in a kind of unspoken way. So we're committed to excellence, we're committed to arts, we're also committed to arts education, and we serve all Americans. And that was a revolutionary action because in the history of the NEA, we had tended mostly to serve the arts centers and then make some efforts at broadening it. But from my very first year, I said, we are going to have a grant in every congressional district in the United States. Now, people thought that was political. It really wasn't. There's 750,000 people in every congressional district. And we had dozens that never got grants, never got direct grants. And I just said, I can't believe that you have any place with 750,000 people that there aren't many arts and arts education organizations that deserve sponsorship. If they don't come to us, we should find them. And within 1 year, we did this, and immediately our relationship with the public and with Congress changed, because people understood that we weren't playing favorites. We weren't, giving more to the people who had it and ignoring those who did not have. So, some people say, "Oh, how political!" It wasn't political in the least. It's just democratic common sense. Public agency serves the public, and an agency constantly has to reevaluate how well it's serving the public and how fairly it's serving the public. Now, of course, New York City and Los Angeles and San Francisco still got more grants, than Savannah, Georgia, or, Tampa, Florida. But everybody in the United States was, in a sense, for the first time in history, on a regular basis, engaging with our programs. And that also led to the creation of these national initiatives: Shakespeare and American People, The Big Read, Poetry Out Loud, the NEA Jazz Masters, and American Masterpieces. This allowed us to sort of spend a little bit of overhead money in Washington and give local arts organizations free programs. So rather than having to spend half of its money or more for a local theater company and doing educational materials, we gave them for free so they could use 100% of their grant to hire actors, to bring performances. And it was a very efficient and effective way of reaching millions and millions of Americans. And my advantage, I had two advantages as being a chairman. First, I was a working artist without any institutional support. I was just making my living as a writer in various fields, from opera and broadcast to poetry and textbooks. Secondly, I was a poor kid who first came into an enlarged understanding of himself and his own possibilities through the power of art. And initially through music, and then through literature, constantly engaged with the visual arts. And I understood the human transformation that early encounters with the arts can bring. And so, I came to Washington as a practicing artist and as a kid who had his life changed through encounters with art. Well, I had 1,000 reasons to support the NEA and 1,000 reasons not to support the NEA. What I did was I spoke to everyone. I went to the people who had the biggest problems with the NEA, and I sat down and talked to them. And I have to say that I agreed that the NEA had done a lot of stupid things in its history. More importantly, they'd been careless in their history. They had ignored about a third of the country. Because I'll tell you, my experience with the people that hated the NEA, they had a two-part paradoxical statement. They go, "I hate what you're doing, and my district's not getting any." And I think that's very true. By middle of my tenure, I would be in those tunnels under Congress, walking with a congressman, and he would just pull over another member and go, "This is Dana Joy, chairman of the NEA. You like him? He's got a grant in your district." And the guy would go, "Oh, really? Yeah, he's got a grant in every district." And in the just going through these tunnels, I would meet 6 or 7 congressmen or senators, and both, one of my achievements, or one of the, I hate to make this personal, one of our achievements during my tenure was that we had a bipartisan, bicameral majority. We spoke across the aisles, and we made the NEA non-political. We essentially had the credibility that we were serving the American people by bringing the highest quality possible programs to the broadest audience possible. And when you did this, it was, you'd get in these conversations, and they would say, one of the things we did is we took our Shakespeare program and I brought it to military bases. And people said, "Oh, this is politics." I said, "No, it isn't." I have a sister who's 21 years younger than me. She was in Afghanistan then, in the middle of a desert with an automatic weapon, and there were 3 million Americans who were in the service or were in military families, and we had never done anything for them in the history of the NEA. So I took this Shakespeare program and I brought it into the military. And let me tell you how I did it. This is, there was a fellow, an American senator, later a cabinet member, who hated the NEA. He was just, ferociously anti-NEA. So I met with him, and we started arguing. And I said, I read your criticisms. I think about half of them are right. He said, "Oh, they're all right." I said, "No, they're half right, which makes them a half truth, which is not good enough." So he began arguing. He loved arguing with me so much that he canceled his next meeting. And what he liked was that I listened to him, I engaged him, I told him what I liked, what I didn't. And so finally, his aides were pulling him out for a meeting, and he goes, "I'm still not going to support you." And I told him, "I don't ever ask you to do anything that you don't think in your conscience is the right thing for your state and for your constituents." And he kind of stopped, and he heard that. That's not what and he says, "Maybe I'll vote for your budget next year." By the end of that year, he wrote an editorial in support of our programs. And he did that because we had brought the Shakespeare program to the military. I made him part of an event, and he understood the benefit of what we did. But the hard part is I had to do that 535 times, because even with the people who were NEA supporters, they would ask me to come off to Tacoma, Washington with them, and I would fly out. I would speak with them to all their groups, or I would do it in Wichita, Kansas. So I lived on the airplanes with these people, but I spoke to them. I knew what they thought. They knew what I thought. I brought them so they could see firsthand the benefit of the programs that we were doing. And I once had a congressman who I'd come to South Bend, Indiana. He was a freshman congressman, and somehow I got him on his calendar. And so it's pouring rain, and he says, "There must be some mistake." He says, "There's no arts in this district." I said, "This is Rust Belt, and this is not our problems." I said, "Look, we've got a meeting right across the street from this hotel. Just walk over and greet the crowd." He says, "There's not going to be anybody there." And just to get across the street, we're just being deluged by rain. I get him in there, and he goes, "Place is kind of full. I wonder what's going on." I said, "This is our group. This is the arts group from South Bend." He says, No, it's just too many people. And we start walking. I said, he wanted to leave. I said, "Just speak for a couple minutes." And so he goes, and then suddenly this woman comes up to him and says, "Hey, how you doing?" And he realized that this is a woman who gave him campaign money. And he says, "Well, what are you doing here?" She says, "Well, I'm on the board of the Children's Arts Group." And he basically said, "We have a children's arts group?" Then I brought him a little bit, and he met somebody else he knew. By the time I got him up to the room, he had met 3 or 4 people that he knew from his political career who were funding local arts groups. And so I decided, I said, "I want to come here. I want to introduce our freshman congressman. He's a Republican, but he is a friend of the arts." And this was news to him. He didn't even know it was on it. And by he started talking, he started doing this. And 5 minutes later, he was a friend of the arts. But what I did is I showed him how what we were doing reached the people he represented and the people who helped him. So, you have to do that again and again. Some people know this, some members of Congress don't. But it was an educational process for them because they have 1,000 things to do before they think of the NEA, the NEH. And what happens is they mostly work on received opinion. So if everybody hates the NEA, they hate it. If everybody loves the NEA, they love it. If their party loves it. So what I did is I changed the interaction between the National Endowment for the Arts and Congress to a personal level where they understood what we did for their people in their state or their district, and it worked. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of confidence because I had a lot of people shout at me. But, as I told somebody, it's just like talking to my mother, Let me say something. I said this when I was a chairman. I think it shocked people. It'll shock people today. If the NEA were taken out of existence, it would not fundamentally change the course of the American arts. The American arts are funded by the imagination of people. They're funded largely privately. What taking the NEA away would do would greatly affect the access to the arts for the people less capable of getting it. So, the kids that could never get arts education from their parents, from school districts which can't afford it, from urban areas that can't afford it. I mean, my Shakespeare company, our Shakespeare program did not suddenly bring Shakespeare to the American people. Local companies were doing it. What we did was we brought a couple hundred paid tickets into every performance. And those were high school kids and their chaperones, their teachers and parents. And that revived these local theater companies. For years, I'll be eating in a restaurant and somebody come over and goes, "Are you Dana Gioia?" And I go, "Yeah." So I assume that they're a poet and they recognize me as a poet. They go, I said, "Well, how do you know me?" He goes, "Well, I'm an actor. And when you were, the years that you were in Washington, I got 40 weeks of paid work a year. It was the best part of my career. I was in Othello, I was in Romeo and Juliet, and it was just so great." And so you think about that. This was the other thing I was concerned about, is the early NEA defined the arts as the creation of new art. But I look in the art as a kind of ecosystem, which has the audience, at one end, the creative artist at the other. But in between, you have institutions, you have performers. So giving paid work to musicians, giving paid work to actors, this was very important to me. We have, a couple million people in the United States whose primary employment is the arts. Dancers, actors, musicians, singers, plus the directors, the stage people, the designers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those people are going to be artists no matter what you do to them. You humiliate them, you impoverish them, they're still going to do it. Wouldn't it be nice if, in terms of helping the arts, we give $1 that goes, to the arts group and then goes to them and then benefits the public? So I looked on the funding not as these discrete sums, but as a flow of financing, which went from artist to institution to audience. And a lot of arts presenters would say, "Well, I can't really do Shakespeare because I don't know if I'm going to sell out. But if you guarantee you're going to get me 200 people for every performance, I'll book it." And so we, so part of it was to, what I learned in business is different from what I learned in art. In art, I learned that existence is a zero-sum game. You get the part, I don't. I get the award, you don't. What I learned in business was that successful things, basically is a win-win situation. Let's create a situation where if this goes through, everyone involved with it benefits. Now, I mean, some people benefit with it more than others, but everybody is part of the success. So I took a win-win mentality, which is very alien to artists because they don't feel like they're living in a win-win world, and we created win-win situations. I want to congratulate the employees, the board, the alumni of the National Endowment for the Arts of having reached the 60th anniversary of the legislation that created them. This is an extraordinarily important milestone. At the moment, I imagine the agency is feeling very downhearted, very persecuted. Let me say two things. First of all, this is not the first time that's happened. This agency has gone through many crises. It's been downsized more than once. The agency will survive because what we provide is something the United States of America will need. And as we move through the current moment, that need, that benefit will become more obvious, I think, to the public, to the press, and to politicians. What we need to do is to continue serving the American people by bringing the best of arts and arts education to as many of them as we can possibly reach in a fair and democratic manner. That will speak louder than any politician.